December 23, 1913. That is the day American finance changed forever. President Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act into law, creating what would become the most powerful central bank in the world. But here is what most people do not understand. The Federal Reserve was not born out of ambition, it was born out of panic. Welcome to the Spotlight Business Report. I am Bruce Hamilton. Today, in part 1 of our look at the Federal Reserve, we explore its origins and its evolution through the end of the gold standard. We will walk through the first 60 years of history, from the desperate bankers of 1907 to the end of Bretton Woods. Let us begin where all central bank stories begin, with a crisis. Before 1913, the United States was the only major financial power without a central bank, and it showed. The country suffered 6 major banking panics in the 19th century alone, but the final straw came in October 1907. A failed attempt to corner the copper market caused a cascade of bank runs. Trust companies collapsed. The New York Stock Exchange plunged nearly 50% from its peak. And here's the astonishing part. Without a central bank to inject liquidity, the legendary financier J.P. Morgan himself was forced to step in. He locked the country's leading bankers in his library and literally forced them to pledge millions to save the system. One historian later wrote, "One man, one private citizen single-handedly prevented a complete financial meltdown. That moment terrified Washington. Lawmakers realized that if Morgan had a heart attack, the entire economy could have died with him. So 6 years of political battles later, the Federal Reserve Act passed. The new system included a 7-member board of governors in Washington and 12 regional reserve banks. The goal was simple: provide an elastic currency that could expand during crises and contract during good times. But as we will see, simplicity never lasts. Let us look at the numbers because they tell a fascinating story. The balance sheet in 1914 was dominated by one thing: gold. The United States was still on the gold standard, so nearly every major asset on the Fed's books was literally gold bullion. On the other side of the ledger, bank deposits matched those gold holdings. It was clean, it was transparent, and it lasted about 5 minutes. World War I broke out in Europe, and suddenly the Fed was financing wartime investment. The balance sheet expanded. By the 1920s, the Fed's lending as a percentage of GDP was actually larger than it would be during the 2008 financial crisis. Then came the Great Depression, and here we encounter the first great controversy. Many economists argue that the Fed's failure to act, its decision to stand by while banks failed by the thousands, turned a severe recession into a global catastrophe. The Fed learned a brutal lesson: in a crisis, hesitation is deadly. By World War II, the balance sheet had ballooned to roughly 22% of GDP. Gold still dominated assets, but treasury purchases had begun. The Fed was no longer a passive gold vault, it was becoming an active manager of the economy. In 1944, the world agreed to the Bretton Woods system. This moment changed everything. The dollar would be pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Every other currency would be pegged to the dollar. For 27 years, this worked. But by 1971, the math no longer worked. The United States had printed more dollars than it had gold to back them. Foreign governments began demanding gold instead of paper. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar was no longer redeemable for gold. And just like that, the world moved to fiat currency, money backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of the United States government. Gold's share of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet dwindled to minimal levels. Gold's value on the balance sheet was fixed at $42.22, where it remains today. Let me repeat that. The Fed still carries gold on its books at $42 an ounce, while the market price hovers near $2,000. That accounting fiction marks the end of an era. In part 2, we will see how the Fed faced the double-digit inflation of the 1970s and the unprecedented crises of the 21st century. I am Bruce Hamilton. Thank you for watching part 1 of the Spotlight Business Report.